62 buffs. That's a lot of buffs. I don't know how many people they've had working on this or how long it's been in the works for, but 62 buffs is a lot of buffs. So we're going to look today and see if any of them make sense or rather the opposite, if they don't make sense, and kind of give our thoughts on them. And of course, these are just my first impressions. I could be wrong about this. This could be bad takes. I don't know. I'm going to need more time to play with the character now with these buffs, obviously. But we're just going to see if a lot of these are necessary buffs or if this was blanket buffing. Because the problem with Amon, in my opinion, currently isn't so much that he has bad skills. More so he has bad synergy between skills. So if these are just percentage buffs to every single skill in his tree, it's not really going to fix the problem, it's just going to band-aid it, right? So we'll see together here. The most important one I think I want to talk about is Scourge. So Scourge today has had the maximum vengeance increased by 50%, which I believe they are referring to the vengeance meter, right? It has a larger maximum vengeance count. You can see it says there maximum vengeance 13.3k, so it was lower before this, so a 50% increase. So it seems like the idea of this is to make Amon more tanky, which he didn't need, and to make Forge Whip deal more damage. Now they also buffed Forge Whip by 27% today, chat. What are our thoughts on that? What are our thoughts? Is that good or bad? In my opinion, Scourge was his strongest action skill. So to see it buffed is peculiar. A 27% buff to the whip damage, and also it gets more damage because of the Scourge buff. So it's actually more than 27%. So it got a considerable buff to the whip damage today, which is interesting because, again, I didn't think it needed a buff. I thought it was fine. I hated Scourge, couldn't get it to deal damage. I did not have that same experience. It was the one action skill I could get working on Amon. So it's interesting to see that buffed. Now we look at the Vengeance tree. They've updated the augments. So let's start with Blast Chill. Forge Waves consume more Vengeance and they explode on impact. This got a 45% damage increase, chat. 45% damage increase. This is going to be his best tree. I mean, Molten Rebuke damage got its damage increased by 86%. So Forge Wave is Molten Rebuke. You throw the shield. This one is justified. This got an 86% buff. I don't know how they determine the percentages they want to do. When we were working on Redux, we just I forget what we did. I think we just went off a feeling, to be honest. I don't know if they do the same, but they did 86%. I think that's fair. This, I think, was one of his worst augments, to be honest. I think this is justified. Eternal Winter, massive Forge Wave damage. So, actually, I can't even see it. Oh, it was right here. I skipped it. So, this makes it so that you get action skill duration with your Forge Waves. This is a very, very good augment, by the way. One of his best in the tree. They increased the damage by 100%. It got double the damage today. I think that's justified. I think that's a justified buff. To be honest, this was you use this for the duration, not for the damage, which in my opinion is fine. But this got double its damage today. Then we have Storm Lance damage increased by 52%. I think this is fair. These aren't very good, if I'm being honest. Like, I would have gone more. And the detonation damage increased by 10%. I would probably go more on this, to be honest. I think Blast Chill did not need to be buffed. That's kind of crazy to me that got buffed. 45%. It's okay, though. We'll play with that anyway. We'll put that on right now. We were using Chronic Thrum before we were able to deal so much damage with this. I'm glad they didn't buff this. That would have been very insane for Amon. His AoE clear would have been disgusting. So now we go into the capstones in this tree. So again, we have 62 buffs today. Get some popcorn. If you're watching on YouTube, please sub to the channel. We want to hit 80k. Okay, so capstones on Vengeance. Glacial Rapture. I'm guessing they went... Nope, they didn't go in order. Okay. So this one is you swing the Forge Whips, dealing cryo damage for 2 hits to nearby enemies, and you do a Cryonic Fissure. This, I also think, is his best capstone currently, but it was underwhelming. The damage wasn't good. So they've reduced the cooldown to 60 seconds, which I didn't think was necessary, but it's not the end of the world. It's fine. The damage was increased by 16%, and the fissure damage by 41%. That's a very, very nice buff. It's a very nice buff. Wrathfall damage is increased by 46%. You call down a Forge Sword. I think that's fine. That's a good buff. So Blue Tree, all in all, is getting a ton of love. Now we're not into the other trees yet, but my first impression is that Blue Tree was already a very, very good tree, probably his best tree, if I'm being honest with you. The reason I say that is because he's an Ordnance character. So if you're not playing Ordnance on Amon, I'm not going to say you're doing it wrong, but like you wouldn't pick Salvador if you don't like using guns, right? If you wanted to do melee, you would pick Zero. So this was already his best tree, in my opinion. So I'm curious to see what the other buffs do here. So now we have the passives in Vengeance. So we start with Scorched Kairos, which got buffed. No, dude. No, dude. So this went from... It used to give 5% per point, so you would get 25% at 5 points. Now you get 30%. Chat, does anyone here think Amon needed more ordnance damage? Let's go to Battleborn now. Where's Battleborn here? So this has gone up by 1% as well. This would have given 15% gun damage. Technically 30 at maximum health. And that's now going to give 40% at maximum health and 20% when full. This one I think is justified. Totally fine. I do think gun damage was lacking on Amon. Battleborn shutdown, you can't use that skill. That's yeah. That's sad. The chat, they didn't buff Tail of the Comet, so that's at least that's a relief. Could you imagine if Tail of the Comet got buffed? Oh my god. Scar Tissue buff. Amon gains maximum health capacity and rep kit healing. It's got a 1% increase. I didn't really use it before. I'm probably not going to use it now. I don't need max health in a tree where I have a shield that makes me invulnerable to a lot of damage. That's my take on that. And rep kit healing... Okay, chat, I want to get your take on this. I personally don't see any value in rep kit healing buffs. I've never took a rep kit and been like, wow, that wasn't enough health. You know, like, I don't see that as a valuable stat. Is that just me? Do you guys agree? I just don't use it. I do not use it. There you go, Crit Knife Gang. I don't use it. Are you happy now? Amon gains increased action skill duration and gun swap speed. So only the action skill duration got an increase from 4% to 5%. So it's 20% action skill duration now with 5 points. I don't think that 1% makes the difference on if I'm going to pick this or not, to be honest. You don't need gun swap speed on Amon. You're in the blue tree right now. You're doing ordnance, so it would be... I mean, you could come in here for gun swap, but, you know, the action skill duration isn't needed because you would just take Eternal Winter. I don't care that they buffed this, to be honest. I don't feel any particular way because I'm not going to take this regardless. It's a pointless skill for Amon, in my opinion. At least in my use case, I would never use it. Worldbreaker damage got increased by 50%. This one, whenever Amon ground slams, he consumes all of his flame affinity and stacks to make a fissure in front of him, dealing incendiary melee damage. This is... Okay, Gearbox, if you're watching, this is a pointless buff. Let me tell you. Chat, listen. The problem with Worldbreaker, it's not the damage. It's the cooldown. It's a 60-second cooldown. It is not worth taking ground with this Worldbreaker. Not worth it. If you want to buff Worldbreaker, remove its cooldown. Just take it away. Like, it's already very situational. You have to ground slam, and in Borderlands 4 you can't slam here. Look, you can't slam. So this is your gameplay with Worldbreaker. Jump, slam, and then no, I can't do anything. Okay, now I can. And jump, slam, and I'm locked in it. Again, I can't move. See what I'm saying? It's locking my camera. I can't. You're nerfing yourself by slamming, right? So this having a cooldown, it's not the damage. The damage is pointless. If this isn't enough to kill a boss, I can't wait 60 seconds during a boss kill. So this is not a good skill. I'm gonna be honest. I like the idea of it, but it's executed poorly. The cooldown needs to be like 10 seconds at max. If I'm being honest. With no cooldown, this would be maybe a skill you would want to take. You could build a niche build. No one there's no need to do a World Breaker build right now with 60-second cooldown. So the damage increased by 50%. Okay, next up we have Winter's Kiss. This got increased damage dealt up by 2%. Let's find Winter's Kiss real quick. Again, you'll have to excuse me. Here it is. Whenever you deal ordnance damage, you consume a stack of cryo affinity to spawn an elemental shard. You get more damage. I'm not gonna lie, chat. I don't think the problem with Winter's Kiss is the damage. I'm gonna explain to you why. Are we doing too much complaining? Is this video gonna get dislike bombed by the Crit Knife gang? They're gonna be like, he's only complaining again. I wish you could do more shilling. The problem with this skill is our fundamental problem with Borderlands 4. Borderlands 4 launched with no takedowns, no slaughters, the world events, you barely see them, and when you do see them, they're not difficult, they're not fun, because they need to be difficult, and they need to be repeatable. The point I'm getting at here is there is very, very, very little mobbing endgame in this game, so the problem with Winter's Kiss isn't the damage. Now, what do I mean by this? It's not hard. I'm gonna swap to we are on UVH5. I don't see it at the bottom. Oh, okay, there it is. So the problem right now, chat, in Borderlands 4 is that there's no difficult mobbing, right? So I just want to show you this. So this guy right here, he gets one-shotted, okay? And this guy right here, he gets... Okay, that'll be the shaders. So the point is, there's no difficult mobbing in this game right now. The end game is bossing, okay? The end game, he gets one-shotted with a lag spike. He gets one-shotted. They all get one-shotted. So you can understand, chat, that the problem with Amon has nothing to do. There's not a mobbing problem. Borderlands 4 doesn't have difficult mobbing. It has difficult bossing. And unfortunately, skills like Winter's Kiss, this is not a bossing skill. This is a mobbing skill. So do you see why 2% damage doesn't mean anything? Because we don't have Maliwan, we don't have Guardian, we don't have Slaughter Shaft. There's no difficult mobbing. So 8% was perfectly fine. I'll take the extra 2%, but you can see that this only works when there's a nearby enemy. You want to spawn elemental shards for nearby enemies to kill them with cryo. But there's no difficult mobbing, so you would never pick this. Difficult mobbing vile enemies and elemental eaters, which is a great point. Unfortunately, ordnance completely bypasses vile, so it doesn't matter if they're covered in ordnance, they die anyway. It doesn't matter, right? And you've got Icy Rage above it, which is just infinitely better. You kill an enemy and you get gun damage. So why would I don't need a niche like this. I'll just get free gun damage for nuking enemies, right? So all in all, it's a fine buff, I guess. But it's a niche buff because the skill is niche and there's no niche for it. You want to nuke bosses and this won't help you nuke a boss. I mean, it will in a very situational circumstance, but whenever Amon deals action skill damage, he consumes a stack of shock affinity to cause an elemental bolt to strike that enemy, dealing shock damage. This used to deal 12% damage per point, it's now 15. I think that's a good buff. I don't really have much more to say. I think that's a good buff. Good buff. Nice. Go higher. Fuck it. Well, let's go to 20 points. Let's make that 100% of damage dealt. Why not? Let's turn this bottom right tree and yeah, why not, dude? You can hear Lazy Data having a heart attack. What's the skill below it? Caroming Shard. Chance to ricochet. But again, you need... It's mobbing. Mobbing, right? Like, it's not... There's no difficult mobbing in Borderlands 4 right now. That's the problem. You could say the wildcard missions, but no one's playing them. They're not fun. No one's playing them. They don't give you unique gear, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when you buff a mobbing skill, right? This is the problem. We go into the Crucible action skill next. This one, they've increased the damage of the Forge Axes by 12%. That's fine. Double-edged twin Forge Axe damage increased by 10%. I don't necessarily know that it needed to be increased, but it's only 10%. It's not the end of the world, so that's fine. If it makes people play more Green Tree, I guess win for Gearbox. What's important is if this tree has been improved. So in this tree, there isn't actually... Well, actually, there's a lot of buffs. I stand corrected. Okay, let's start with the augments. Axes and Stone. The action skill cooldown restoration has been increased from 33% to 40%, and same for Ordnance as well. So you used to get Ordnance and action skill cooldown restoration by 33%. That's now 40%. It's fine. It's a fine buff. It's not massive by any means, but it's fine. Endless War. So Endless War, this primed enemies take increased gun damage. So they used to take 15 per stack. They take 20 per stack. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good buff. It might help with gun damage builds. It's not bad. Next we have Hour of the Hammer. So they just increased the damage of this. So you ready a Forge Hammer. They've increased the damage of these. I did think these were lacking. So they got their damage increased by 14%. I would have gone 20, to be honest. If I'm being honest, I would have went 20%. I think it's a good buff anyway. I don't know how effective it's going to be. I would have went 20% though on this buff. Now we have Blade Tempest. Forge Sword damage got increased by 13% and the detonation damage by 4%. I would have went 10. If I'm being honest. I would have went 10. 4%, I would have just left that out at that point. I would have taken 4% on the swords instead of the detonation, if I'm being honest. Again, who does detonations benefit, chat? Primarily, it's like a mobbing thing. It's not... So you know what I'm saying? Like 4% at that point in mobbing, I don't need that. Like, I would have just rather you give me more damage on the swords, because I can use those against the boss a lot easier, right? Capstones on the Cybernetics tree. We first have Snowmaul. You hold to throw a twinned Forge Hammer that deals cryo, and it will ricochet. This got its damage increased by 38%. That is very exciting. Kind of makes me want to play that now. Good buff. Storm Surge is the next one. Storm Surge in the middle here. You throw a twinned Forge Blade that deals shock melee damage and creates a storm on impact. The impact damage has been increased by 10%, and the damage got increased... the storm damage got increased by 60%. This could be very, very good. Pomflangarang. And this one had its fire trail damage increased by 100%. It's 100%. It's double the damage. We'll see. I don't know, to be honest. I'm not going to give my good or bad on this. We'll see. I didn't really use it, to be honest, so... Okay, passives now. Passives. Let's talk about the passives in Cybernetics. There's a lot to go through. We're going to start at the top with Gathering Storm. So, Gathering Storm... well, it was 2%, it's now 3%. So now you get 15% elemental damage per stack, so up to 45%. Good. Elemental damage, it's fine. There's no crazy damage scaling in Borderlands 4, so it's all as lazy, and the rest of the Mobilix guys have coined it now soup. It's just more damage soup, so it's just an extra percent. It is what it is. It's nothing crazy, to be honest. Executioner now increases critical hit by 4%, up from 3%, so you get 20% critical hit damage, which gets doubled to 40%. Pretty good buff. Now we go to Destruction Engine. Increase Forge skill damage and detonation damage. This went up from 5% on the damage, and... it went up to 6% from 5% on the skill damage, and the detonation damage went up to 8% from 6%. 6%, wow. So it went up by 2%. So, to be honest, a pretty nice buff. But again, there's one recurring problem here. It's a fundamental problem with Borderlands 4. Detonations, who does it benefit? People who mob. Is mobbing difficult? No. Mobbing's not difficult in this game. There's no end game content with mobbing. Again, no one cares about the wildcard missions. The detonations primarily benefit a mobbing scenario. So the damage is nice. The buff it's a good buff, I guess. But like I could have killed mobs just fine before. So I don't know, man. It's cool. But Borderlands 4 needs mobbing endgame for this to be even worth... I mean, it's worth taking. I don't want to undersell it. But the point is, again... these seem like they're geared towards good luck Amon players. Now you can mob, but like anyone can mob with any character. It's not hard. It's bossing that's where people hit that wall, right? So now we have Tempered Pyre. Whenever Amon activates his Forge skill, he'll spawn an Axe Forgedrone that attacks nearby enemies for a duration, dealing incendiary melee damage. Okay. So you activate your skill, your Forge skill, so it'll be your double axe, and it'll spawn a drone that will attack other enemies. This got its damage increased by 19%. Okay, then we have Tempered Ice. Whenever Amon activates his ordnance, he spawns a Hammer Forgedrone that attacks nearby enemies for a duration, dealing cryo. If I'm being honest with you guys, I don't think this has any synergy with Amon. I'm not saying you can't find a use case, but in my gameplay, I will never use this for what I'm guessing they want you to, which is a mixture of blue and green. I feel like they want you to proc this and then get it doing stuff from blue tree. I don't see how that really works, to be honest. Regardless, this got its damage increased by 18%. I don't know why this one got 19 and this one got 18. I don't know if they've... I would like Gearbox to explain their work here, to be honest. They've stopped doing what they were doing in Wonderlands, where they would explain why they're making a change. I don't get why this got 19, this got 18. Next up, we have Masterwork, which also got a buff. So, Forgedrones gain increased damage and duration. I thought this was fine before, but it actually got a pretty big buff. It went from 7% damage per point to 10% per point, so up to 50% increase. I'm fine with that. That's good. And increased the duration from 8%, from 5% per point to 8% per point. All around a good buff. Good buff for this skill. Only negative I've got to say is it was already worth coming down here. So I'm not, to be honest, I kind of prefer like making a tree or a portion of a tree into a star rather than doubling down on an already good area. I don't know, it's not the end of the world, but it's just a weird thing I have. Like, I don't really like to see buffs to an already decent side, but I understand, like, Green Tree was lacking. So these buffs are to help with that, which is fine. So, Tempered Lightning. When Amon activates his action skill, he spawns a Sword Forgedrone that attacks nearby enemies. This also got a damage increase by 13%. I don't know why we got, 13, 18... or 13, 18, 19. So this one does 290. This one does 178. This one does 223. I don't know if that's an intention. Like, I would like to know why they went with such specific percentages and not an overall buff for each of these. I would have done 25% per. Personally. I think Forgedrones could deal with a little more love than that. I would have gone 25. That's just me. Amon's gunshots have a chance on crit to spawn an elemental bolt, dealing shock damage. This one is what I'm talking about. You remember when I said that, like, the elemental shard ricocheting to nearby enemies does nothing for you, to be honest, because, like, mobbing is easy, it's bossing you need. This is good. Because you don't need, this isn't a mobbing specific thing. You can use this anywhere. So, actually, very nice. And I believe, I could be wrong here, don't take my word on this, but I believe this would work for ordnance damage. I think ordnance counts as a gunshot. So, on the Merv Malawan launcher, the Northfleet, right? This may actually just work. So, I could be wrong about that, we might have to test that, but pretty nice. So, this elemental bolt has had its damage... it's 40% of damage dealt, up from 30% at one point. Really, really nice. I don't know if it's going to be enough to make this worth chasing, but for a gun build, very, very nice. Very nice. Now we have Escalation is next. So Escalation, Forgedrones gain increased attack speed and movement speed. So this went up from 3% per point to 5%. Very good. Nice buff. Again, 2% is not massive, but it adds up with the rest of the buffs, right? Not bad. This makes me want to do a gun build now. I want to do a gun build with lightning rods. So actually, not bad in the green tree so far. Next, we have Owned Point. So Forgedrones have a chance to critically hit. Whenever they critically hit, they'll restore your action skill cooldown. Good for like an axe spamming build, right? So this has had its critical hit chance increase up by 1% per point. So 15% at 3 points critical hit chance, and before that would have only been 12%. So not bad actually. Critical hit chance is like less is more, right? So, or not really less is more, but 25% crit hit damage is not as big as 25% crit hit chance, for example, is what I mean. So the 12% to 15%, that's actually a pretty considerable buff there. Okay, last tree, we're in the red tree. So now we have the Onslaught action skill. So the Onslaught shield regen has been increased to 15% per second from 10%. Very nice buff. Onslaught rocket punch damage increased by 78%. Here is my take on that. This can be a bossing skill. You can deal very big damage to bosses with this, but I think this buff primarily benefits mobbing again, and I don't think that matters. This will be a good buff if we see people make some really nice builds that are niche, that focus on Onslaught, one-tapping bosses, if they can get it to that point. That's all of the rocket punch buffs. Molten Slam actually got a buff. Now, Molten Slam, I think I'm going to have to put this on. Yes, I am. So, this is, if you remember Wonderlands, chat, this is Clawbringer's Cleansing Flames action skill. And it's kind of bad, to be honest. It had an 80-second cooldown. That's now down to 60 seconds. I would go to 45 personally, but I'll take the 20. I think that's fine. And the damage got increased by 50%. I'll be honest, chap. I would have went 100. I would have doubled its damage. Personally, I would have went 100. 50's fine, I guess. I don't think it's enough. I would have done 100%. This was lackluster in Wonderlands, and it's lackluster in Borderlands 4. I would have went 100%. That being said, I'm sure you could do some crazy stuff with it. Decent buffs to Molten Slam. I don't know if this is going to be considerable in the grand scheme of things, but whatever. Moving on to augments. They only buffed 2 augments for this tree, which is interesting. Very, very interesting. I thought they would have done an all-rounder here, but they didn't. They did 2 augments. The first one, they did Fellfrost. So immediately after a punch, after you do the rocket punch, you press the button again, and you'll do a follow-up attack that deals cryo melee damage in a large area in front of Amon. They've increased the damage of this by 71%. I don't know if this is going to be worth taking still. Maybe. It might be. I don't know. To be honest, that's my take on this. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'd love to lend you more knowledge. I don't know if this is a good buff. It might be. If anyone's played around with this on Amon, let me know what you think of this. I don't really have an opinion on that buff. And then the last one they did was Fulminating Fist. So you gain increased status effect chance while Onslaught is active. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the concentrated lightning wave that deals shock melee damage when you press the button. So they increased this by 69%. Filthy, filthy gooners. I think that's a decent buff. Then we have the capstones in Calamity. So Horcleave. Molten Slam is now Horcleave. Press and hold to swing a Forge Axe. That launches a Forge Wave that does cryo melee damage and freezes enemies it passes through. I'm gonna be honest, chat. I don't know why this isn't in the blue tree. I don't know why this is in the red tree. I feel like this should be a blue tree, or let's do a little theory crafting right now. Let's go over to blue tree. What would we... There you go, Ring of Frostfire. I think we should swap this with this. I think this would just be so much better in the blue tree, if I'm being honest. But whatever. Anyway, the point is, this had a 65-second cooldown. That's now down to 55 seconds. And the damage got increased by 11%. And the detonation damage increased by 18%. A good buff. A good buff. I don't know if it's going to change anything. Again, Red Tree. I mean, you know what? I think it could do a lot of work, actually. If you're coming down here, you're doing it for Berserk and there is only red. You really can't miss out on these. So while you're down here, you might as well grab this and then put some points here and grab this. Why not? Why not? Yeah, sure. Good buffs. Molten Royal. So Molten Slam gains increased radius and stores damage, and pyres will erupt under up to 3 enemies after a delay. Again, it's mostly a mobbing thing. Whatever though, right? It has a 70-second cooldown from 80 seconds. Go to 60. Go to 60. Stormcutter is the last augment we're talking about. Stormcutter, press and hold to swing a massive sword, launching a Forge Wave that deals shock melee damage to everything it passes through, and you'll restore cooldown, duration, and ordnance cooldown for each enemy hit. Pretty good. And it now has a 65-second cooldown, down from 75 seconds. And then into the passive buffs, let's start at the top. We have Heavy Plate as the first one. You gain increased max shield capacity and overshield capacity. So this was 6% per point. It's 7% per point. I think that's fine. I thought this was, honestly, if you weren't doing Red Tree, but you needed to get to Enrage, Berserk, and there is only red, I thought this was the one to go with. Unless you want to do a 2-3 split like I'm doing here. But, like, to be honest, you kind of want that movement speed. This isn't going to change my mind on that. But if I didn't care for movement speed and I was going 5 here, still... So what I'm getting at here is I think this is a pointless buff. It's welcome, but I don't think it's going to change decision making in the tree, which is what I feel like a buff is supposed to do. Would you guys agree? You buff something to, like, help decisions be made. But I don't think that changes my decision making. It's an extra point, and I don't think it's going to be massive. Wield the Storm. You gain increased status effect damage and status effect duration. Again, I think this is a no-brainer pick if you're not doing a melee build, right? You would take 1 point into Gut Punch because you don't need any more than 1 point. But this was the safe bet. And now the status effect damage and duration also got a 1% buff, which again I don't think is massive. But it doesn't change. Even if it was, like, this was already the safe bet, it's still the safe bet. So far, pointless. I don't mean that in a bad way, by the way. If you're watching on YouTube, please don't just think I'm just crying about the game. It's just my feedback on these buffs, because for the record, chat, if you don't know, fun fact, who here knew this? 62 buffs is the highest volume of buffs a Vault Hunter has ever received. Unless we're wrong about that, but Lazy and I are pretty sure that is the highest volume of buffs a Vault Hunter has ever received. So naturally we were like, huh, how much sense do these buffs make? And so far, not much, to be honest. 1%. Just seems like this is substance. It's quantity, not quality, right? Next, we have Tritanium Knuckles. You gain increased melee damage and skill damage. Now, this the skill damage went up to 4% from 3% per point. And the melee damage, 8% up from 7%. I think if you're doing a melee build, maybe you have a little more decision making between these two. But I doubt it. To be honest, I really doubt it, because if you're going with a melee build, I don't really want to have to, like, dot the enemy to death. So my first instinct is just to take the melee damage. I don't know. This is weird. This is a weird set of buffs. I mean, Tritanium, sorry. Tritanium's fine. The extra % is welcomed. Decent buff, I guess. This one confuses me, if I'm being honest with you guys. And then next we have Harbinger. This one also got a buff. And it's down here. Where is it? It's on the right, isn't it? Nope, it's not on the right. Where is it? Okay, so Harbinger got a buff. It's a kill skill. Amon gains increased melee damage and max shield capacity. This went up to 2% per stack from 1%. Solid buff, actually. Wow. The more I think about that, solid. Solid buff. Not bad. And then we have 2 more skills. The first one is Mortal Flare. Let's take a look at Mortal Flare. When Amon kills a weakened enemy, they'll detonate, dealing incendiary melee damage. This got a 22% damage increase. Pointless. I'm going to call this one pointless, chat. This one gets the pointless approval. The reason why is because, again, this is for mobbing, and there's not really much difficult mobbing in Borderlands 4 right now. Gearbox, if you're watching, this is why we needed proper tailored endgame, like a takedown. This is why takedowns have to come back. There is a massive use case for this buff and this skill in a mobbing scenario if mobbing is difficult. There's no difficult mobbing right now. That doesn't mean we want you to buff UVH5 by 500% health. But there's just like no difficult mobbing right now. So like I wouldn't take a skill to make mobbing easier. I would take a skill to make my gameplay easier overall. Like, well, even Harbinger's situational. You see what I'm saying? But like, you want something like this, like Rearm, right? This isn't mobbing dependent. You can do this on a boss. You just have to deal damage and it activates. Whereas this, you gotta kill an enemy. And then we have the last thing today that we're going to talk about on Amon is Judgment. Judgment, Amon deals increased melee damage to enemies below 50% total HP. This one actually can help for bossing, I believe. And this got increased to 10% per point, up from 8%. I think it's pretty decent. I would actually suggest that we go to 12%. I think 10% is fine, but 12% would add a lot of reason as to why you need to go down into the bottom right. But I think it's a nice buff overall. So, not bad. Red tree buff's not bad, but there's some really puzzling decisions here, like there is in the other trees as well, in my opinion. TLDR of the changes today. Let's start with blue tree. Let's do our quick roundup here. I think that blue tree got some very significant buffs today. I think half of those buffs are puzzling. Blast Chill, in my opinion, and Eternal Winter, in my opinion, were some of Amon's best augments in this tree. Perhaps his best. And I don't know why they got buffed, if I'm being honest with you guys. And so we go from why was this buffed when it's this powerful to why was this buffed when it did nothing. And that statement correlates to Worldbreaker. Worldbreaker got a damage increase, but the problem with Worldbreaker is not the damage. The problem with Worldbreaker is its inconvenience. It has a 60-second cooldown, and you have to double jump to activate it. And then you're locked. You're locked. Your camera's locked, your movement's locked. So, to be honest, I don't understand some of the buffs in the blue tree. I don't know why Scorch Kairos got an increase. In the green tree, I'm very happy. To be honest, I think I'm most happy with green tree's buffs. There is some really nice buffs in this tree. I'm excited to try out green tree. We'll see what we can do here. And then finally, we go into the red tree. I think maybe you'll see people doing stuff with Molten Slam now. I still think it needs a lower cooldown. Let's go to like 30% or 45%. And the capstones, just lower them. Make them 60 seconds or lower than that, right? I don't know why we're doing 70. Again, I don't think you should be taking the capstone and getting punished for it. And I mean that in the cooldown department. I'm sure the damage trade-off is nice, but I would go lower on the cooldowns. I think my final rating for today's buffs, I'm not going to give you a number, but I'm going to say good. But if I was grading this as a paper, if I was a teacher grading Gearbox's work, I would say, please explain your work. In Wonderlands, we would explain why we're making the changes we're making, and we're not doing that anymore. It doesn't seem like. All in all, my ranking for the buffs to Amon, I think very good. And I think he's going to feel good to play now. If he didn't before, he'll feel a little bit better. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Amon, though. All in all, decent job, Gearbox. But yeah, I do want to know why some of these changes were made. But yeah, for those of you on YouTube, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll check you next time.